Welcome to The Lost Signals discusses film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzur-Amosi-Thurlow scale,
or MONS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode.
Welcome back to the Lost Signals Reviews Film and Television. I, of course, am Scott Thurlow, and I'm here tonight with Jonathan Ian Manzer.
Hey,
and Stephen Amosi.
How's it going?
Hey, I thought you were going to go with... And tonight we were doing a Green Book, which is a possible Oscar nomination film, looking pretty likely, right, at the time.
Oh, certainly.
So I'm going to go with the log line. We came up with an obvious one, perhaps, but, hey, I'm driving Doc Shirley over here. Sort of combine these stereotypes and the reference to driving Miss Daisy. And so I'll just jump right into it with plot, and that'll be E.
A very Italian Viggo Mortensen.
The most Italian he's ever been.
He's a New York Italian working at nightclubs and being kind of thuggish.
I mean, he's a bouncer, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it seems the implication that he has ties with different groups of people. Anyway, gets
The mob
hired.
specifically.
Hey, we don't talk.
Hey,
They're not called the mob.
Take it easy.
Gets hired to drive a genius pianist to who happens to be black down south, and on the tour.
On a tour of the South, yeah.
Yeah, and he's there to be a driver, but also for protection. And it's kind of a odd couple road movie as they become friends and deal with racial issues in the 60s and.
And it's inspired by a true story, so these people really existed and this more or less happened.
And it's a type of movie that's I don't think is made much anymore. It feels very like it would be in the 80s, sort of that kind of.
I mean, I see what you mean, kind of.
The kind of formula they're using, I don't think is used much, and if it is, it's used for strictly comedic purposes. But this, I liked it quite a bit. I thought it was very well done. I thought it handled its thematics very well done, but narrative-wise. You're dealing with all the tropes involved with these kind of things, which you have Mahershala Ali's character is a very straight-laced person without much real-world experience. You have Viggo Mortensen's character who is very streetwise, rough and tumble.
He's the man of the street.
Yeah, and they grow together. And it feels old-fashioned in a way. If you in the formula it uses, but I like that formula, and I thought it handled it very well.
I mean, I thought it handled it fine. It wasn't bad by any means. So whatever I say after this, like and all the other questions, I'm not saying this movie sucked, but you mentioned that it sticks to or uses a formula, and to me that was like very obvious. Like I could almost predict where they were going to go as characters, and like that's fine. Like it made sense narratively as well. Yes, true, but it didn't like jump out at me. So I'm looking at a very solid 2 for score because it was perfectly fine, serviceable, as I say a lot. But I think in this case, it was that to a T. So maybe I'll speak more about like other angles later, but at least for plot, for me, that's what I'm looking at. What do you think, Steve-O?
Yeah, so I'm looking at this movie in terms of a 2. I thought at certain parts in the plot it dragged a little bit. Like it was trying to hammer home a point that was already made, or at certain points it felt like real like softballs lobbed up to like, hey, like here's a here's something that like we need to like hammer home as part of this feel good, a black guy and a white guy who don't initially like each other learn to accept their differences type of story. And yeah, I thought it was well done. I thought it was fairly well written, but it didn't try to answer any difficult questions, I don't think. And I thought that it was a little bit soft in terms of that. Like that
might be more themes, but I do see what you mean.
Right. And in terms of that, so the plot went from you get to meet Viggo Mortensen's character.
Tony Lip.
I was going to call him the Lip.
Nope.
But he doesn't like to be called that. Tony Lip. And then you meet, through him, you meet Mahershala Ali's character, Doc Shirley, and then it's kind of just a buddy road movie, which is enjoyable.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not
but I
well
thought that
crafted.
I thought that a lot of like more difficult parts of this could have been scripted not quite so simplified, I guess. I thought this was a little bit simplified as a movie.
It's very interesting you say that, but thematically, I completely disagree with you. Narratively, let me rebut that.
Sure.
All right. So, oddly enough, even though you are following Tony Lip initially, Vigo's character, he's in his element. But the minute that he becomes the employee of Doc Shirley, and you're seeing their initial the trip through the Midwest, Doc Shirley has the power dynamic in there.
Sure.
Yeah.
And as they go south, you, even without ignoring their friendship and the dynamic between them, you get to watch all of a sudden, just by moving across a line, their societal role flips. And it actually gets worse and worse as they go south, in a way. And I think that, so you have the friendship dynamic, which you're watching, but you're also watching that friendship play out with their roles being challenged and who they are as people.
No, you're absolutely right
and
about
that's
that.
why I'm giving you 3. I thought it was very interesting to watch. And yeah, you're right there, but they're showing you when they enter Kentucky, this is their role. Now they're entering Georgia. Now they're entering Mississippi. And like you're seeing the same scenes in a way play out with slightly small context shifts. And I like the subtlety of that. Maybe it didn't work for you, but it worked for me, so I'm giving you a 3.
Yeah, I get you. I guess allow me to rebut and perhaps final thoughts is like, I'd see what you mean there, but I tend to lean to what Steve-O said, where while all that stuff material was contained therein, I just thought it was a bit more superficial to me, like my impression of it, my like reaction to it. So like while it was perfectly fine, like again, like, well crafted, fine story, it all made sense, and like seeing their relationship and friendship unfold was again perfectly well handled, just not like to the higher degree, like not like mind blowing or anything like that. So I'm probably gonna give it still a very strong 2, just not enough for me for a 3. But I see the anger you're taking. It just that's my reaction to it.
Yeah, So just in terms of plot for this, because I think we're going to get into a lot of this.
Yeah, I will say,
question.
Before you go on, some of that does tie into themes, I would say, like what my sort of issues with it.
Just in terms of plot for this, I thought that this movie didn't necessarily need to be a 2-hour and 10-minute movie, right? Like I thought that it could have been the same movie basically at an hour and a half. I thought that there were scenes that weren't not even scenes that weren't necessary, but scenes that went on a little bit too long and without the punctuation that they needed to be.
Very much like your review right now.
Sure. But like without the punctuation, they needed to have a really big impact on the movie. So I'm gonna give it a 2. I thought that the beginning and the end were fairly strong. The middle sagged a little bit for me, and I'm gonna give it a 2.
All right, and you're giving it a 3E. It seems all right. Well, let's tie into what we just mentioned with themes, and that'll be you, Steve-O.
Sure. So the themes I thought were very strongly they were making sure to make the theme of this movie a headline.
Sure, it was quite clear what they were going for, yes.
And it has a lot to do with the racial implications of going down south for a black man who was a pianist in the 60s, and what that meant, how difficult it was for him. Excuse me. How difficult it was for him to go down there, and at some point, one of his band members talks about it and says, "Yeah, the entire point is not to be, is not to take the easy road, but it's in order to make change, you have to be courageous, which I thought was a really good point. I had a little bit of a problem with how I didn't feel like they made it quite. I don't know how to put this. It didn't seem like the stakes were as high as they should have been, I guess, in this movie. And I don't know exactly why I felt that way, but like the racism that was experienced was there and it was real for sure, but it didn't feel like there was ever a chance of the two of these guys losing, I guess, in terms of like in broad terms, right? Like they felt like, oh, this is going to be a feel good movie throughout. Like there's the biggest challenge they experienced was going to jail, I guess, in where was that, Georgia
or Alabama, one of them, I think.
And then he calls Bobby Kennedy and gets him out of it, and it's like, all right, well, I guess you got that in your back pocket. Well, like, the stakes didn't feel as real as I think they should have felt, and I think that's I think it's a little bit of a disservice to this story, because I feel like this was a really interesting take on somebody who is trying to live in both worlds, going to the South, not realizing for the first time, but like, confronting the fact that he doesn't really actually live in either one of these worlds. Mm. And they try to show that throughout the movie.
There's even a line or a quick exchange about that exact thing. He even sort of points it out at the end.
Yeah,
character that is. Exactly.
And they try to show it throughout the movie to varying degrees of success, in my opinion. But I'll leave it up to you guys.
But I think that he is very familiar with. He doesn't come to a realization. He knows that he is Merjali, that is fighting a system that he doesn't particularly know how to fight. Mm-hmm. What he has is here's the things. He's a erudite. He is a brilliant pianist, and he thinks that just by putting on I'm trying to say this
parse it
correctly.
out. Yeah.
He is trying to ingratiate himself in with white society because he doesn't feel part of the black society. Mm-hmm. And I think at the beginning of this, and he feels that by becoming performance artists, they will accept him. And that's part of the thing, is that they're not going. At least some segments of the society will never accept him because his achievements will never mean anything to them. He is a servant.
They'll
like
never
the
view
servants
they'll never view him otherwise.
You're not allowed to eat at our tables. You're not allowed to. Which I think is the great thing, is that he doesn't get to eat at that restaurant at the end. But he gets to eat at the table with Viggo Mortensen. You were seeing this not through his eyes, though. We're seeing through Viggo Mortensen's eyes, who is a mercenary in a lot of ways. Mm. He's racist. You see it. I mean,
they certainly set him up to be at the beginning, for sure. Yeah.
But he's willing, again, to work for a black guy as long as the pay is good. Like his own benefit and benefit to his family outweighs
whatever his views are on.
Yes, thank you for answering that for me. Yeah. And so I think it's very interesting to see this point of view of racism, that you have someone who's trying to be an insider in a black man trying to be an insider in white culture, who is probably more intelligent and more skilled than any of the people he's trying to ingratiate himself with, but he can't. Meanwhile, Viggo's easy wherever he goes. He can hang out with the black culture. He can hang out with. He chooses not to hang out with the white culture because he doesn't feel that he needs to. Like, they're the elitist white culture. Yeah. He doesn't feel
the hoity-toities.
Exactly, and I think that I think the point of the story is the fact that you have a little bit of cultural development theory. Women tend to be the forerunners of cultural change before men are, and you actually see this in this film with
Dolores, I believe is his wife,
accepting like black children, offering them beverages without a thought to that. It's just the polite thing to do. And you also have working classes much more willing to accept change than elitist classes are. So I think Viggo is showing that kind of Italian poor culture as forwardly. The thing is, they're outwardly racist, but they're more willing to accept change than the elitist group who is
like the country clubbers down
polite,
yeah.
but harbor those feelings. So I think, and yes, they had the workers out in the field while he's being driven, but it's an interesting look into how cultural change develops, and that's what I thought that was fascinating throughout, and that's why I'm going to give it a 1.
It's tough because I could almost be convinced either way. I was struggling with this one because my initial reaction, as I said, that ties into somewhat to the plot as we just talked about, was that while it addressed the divide and like the situation like okay enough, to me it didn't go deeply enough. Like you said, like kind of like what you're saying, Steve. Like the stakes didn't seem high enough. Like I don't know if I felt as strongly about it in that sense, but I do see what you mean because yes, you could see that the relationship is going to obviously develop and be positive, and that they would come to appreciate something about each other's culture.
Here's the thing:
like that was never in question
for
for
a
me.
biography, though.
Yeah.
What kind of stakes would you have liked in that?
Yeah,
would you like to manufacture danger where there had been?
No, you're absolutely right.
Or would you like to have made change, which is still not affected today?
Well, I was going to bring that up very thing because, as we mentioned, it is based on like these people actually existed and this story happened in the 60s.
But
so you're right. It's
Scott,
almost the first...
I'm sorry. Before we go any further, I would like to just point out that Dr. Shirley, the actual Dr. Shirley's family, fucking hated this movie because they said it was a pack of lies.
Okay,
so
interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah, like so that's something that I knew going into it that perhaps colored my opinion of the movie a little bit, but
it certainly would have mine if I had known that.
Sure. Yeah, so like I don't think it's the case that this is just what happened.
A 1-to-1 ratio,
like that type of thing. I think it's that this is a movie that was made as a feel-good type movie because that's what it is. And like, don't get me wrong, I felt good while I was watching this movie, and there were points where I was like, "Oh, that's really nice." Like, I'm glad that happened. Sure. I wish that could happen with everybody. Like, this is how race relations should be. You learn that somebody else is an actual human, and then you like them. But that's not apparently what actually happened.
Do you have more knowledge about that?
I didn't read a ton into it. I apologize. I know that I'm being judged right now.
You were being judged
not just now. That, yes, but go on.
But yeah, so just to give you that
sure.
information, Scott, and then I sorry to cut you off there, but
I mean that's very interesting to know. So yeah, I didn't obviously know that either going into it, but I was going to sort of compare it like roughly to First Man, where like because it's again based on a true thing and the survivors I guess surrounding it. But regardless, all I'm saying is like sort of disregarding that since I didn't know that going into it. So I'm trying to go on my actual impression. Even so, that like I appreciate their intent, what they were trying to do. I just didn't think it went far enough. But I don't know if that's enough for me to give it a 0. Like it didn't fail per se. It just I would have preferred a bit more digging deeper and a bit more nuance. But I did like what was portrayed there.
So you think it should have approached the line of being not feel good?
Yeah, maybe because you know what? Because I thought to myself, I don't know if I mentioned to you guys precast, but I'll mention now. Like another movie that popped in my head to compare it to was Detroit, which is a very unflinching look. It's a very different movie. I get it, but it was still looking at the same issue broadly, regardless, and was a lot. To me, it felt like more visceral. Granted, this film again was not trying to do the same thing, but it was nevertheless addressing the same issues in the same era of America. So it's tough for me, but I guess at the end of the day, how I'm going to view it is that I don't think they failed. I'm going to give it probably a soft 1. Coming into it, I was going to give it maybe a soft 0, but I do think that there is enough there, at least certainly through their relationship, of Mahershala's and Viggo's relationship with each other, whether or not like the broader issue is addressed fully or adequately, or at least satisfactorily to me. Go on.
You see, the fact that Steve brought in this new knowledge changes my opinion of this film quite a bit.
Okay. Because
if they had sacrificed... Because I thought this was, you're not going to have a perfectly true story
sure.
or any kind of retelling. But I thought that it felt very real because of its anticlimacticness.
And at the end, it even said, like, if you remember,
it's
like...
a word now.
yeah.
But because, like, he got out by. I could totally see that, like him pulling some strings, but yeah. So it didn't have the lynch mobs chasing them or anything like that. But
Sure.
again, I kind of liked it for its kind of simplicity's sake. But if I find out that it's lies, then that does
Certainly that might change something.
Well, I mean, the true part is that they did go on this road trip together and they did become lifelong friends.
I was gonna say, at
so,
the
like,
end, they even
that's
said, like-
correct. Like, that
Yeah.
part is true. In fact, you know, they say at the end of the movie that
yeah, that's what I was going to bring up. They
that
were friends.
for life. They stayed friends for
Sure.
life, and they both died like within weeks of each other.
Months
I think
or whatever,
in,
but still.
2013. But there's so much that goes into a story like this, and there's so much like nuance to a character. To both of these characters, I'm sure, like, you know, they both bring in a lifetime of baggage, and
Sure.
it's made very obvious in the movie that they both have a lot of baggage, and that plays into the theme of this movie is like how do characters like this interact, and like what does that mean to their interaction? Like, clearly they don't like each other.
At least on the outside, or at least they're wary about each other.
From the beginning, they don't like each other. Tony, because he's black, is wary of him, and Doc Shirley, because Tony is of a lower class, he's wary of him. And I do like that they play with that a little bit, but I wish that they had gone more into that like those two dynamics and how they play against each other.
I don't know
film.
how much more I would have enjoyed. I mean, it's my personal opinion on it. I thought that they had got to the point you're making earlier. I think they got their point. How that friend, I felt that it was believable. The transition.
Yeah, I'm not saying it wasn't that, and I think you convinced me.
You're
though.
not. I'm arguing with
Fair
Steve
enough. Fair enough.
I think that if they had done more friendship stuff, I would not have. I thought that they would have been belaboring a point.
I'm not trying to say that. I actually liked the way that I like the arc of their friendship. But what I'm, I guess, saying is that they could have had that same arc, but gone a little bit deeper into who the other was than, you know, like, what do you know about Doc Shirley? He's a brilliant pianist. He is an alcoholic, and like all the things that you learn about him that are like the little moments where they click are like very superficial things, like the chicken.
Not always though.
Like the chicken, and like the, you know, like, the 3 minutes of he's gay on screen time, and then like they don't go into that anymore. They never talk about it again.
They do. They say you should. They talk about the relationship, and Vigo's character, who I would imagine Johnny Lip wasn't the most gay rights individual, in the world.
Yeah.
Kind of.
But he's like, I've seen shit.
Basically, I felt that he was saying, I'm not going to judge you for it, but don't bring it up again. And then they talk about relationships and about how, you should call
His brother,
your brother.
Well, yeah, and like, well, Doc says he was married at one point too.
I'm pretty sure the brother was a metaphor for
his
a former
possible
relationship.
lover. Yeah, sure.
And he's like,
Maybe.
I kind of got that, but maybe I'm wrong on that. But nonetheless, it's call the people you're that in your life.
Sure.
So I don't know.
I think at the end of the day, it is enough for me to give it a 1. Like, while I do somewhat feel that they could have addressed things a little more deeply, but I think what was there works perfectly well, especially the dynamic of their friendship, even though I do agree, like you said, they could have done a little bit more facets to it, but I think it's perfectly fine as is, and I was kind of flipped on it because I was going to come in, like I said, giving it a soft 0, but I'm giving it a 1 at the end of the day. Are you doing that too, Steve-O? Sounds like you're giving it a 1E.
Oh, yeah. Strong one, actually.
Yes.
I think I'm gonna come in on a soft 0 on this.
Mm-hmm.
It was very close to a 1, but like it's just, I don't know. It's the theme I felt kind of beat over the head and didn't go deep enough at the same time.
As you pointed out and beat us over the head with. Sorry, I'm going to be hostile.
Yes.
You've been very hostile so far.
You're in the deep south now, motherfucker. Well, let's move on. Anyways, to antagonists, which will be me. Racist dicks, of course. Like, as personified by all the the guy who ran the club, who they invited Doc Shirley to play at, but won't let him eat at the restaurant, and the redneck hillbillies who were beating him up on the other like sort of dive bar. All just the hostility he encountered throughout from the racial divide that was in America and still exists to this day. So there's not like any one person or thing, I would say, like aside from that. But I think, of course, tied into everything we just said, that is certainly the antagonist, and certainly Doc certainly was antagonized by it, and Vigo as Tony, while not that was affecting him, but he at least saw it and could sympathize a bit more and could realize how he was acting previously to that.
I'm gonna one up you. I'm gonna see your racism,
okay,
and one up you isms.
All right,
classism plays a role.
Yeah. You're right.
In a sense, prejudice in general. The prejudice that
you're right. I should have said
Tony
that.
Love had against Doc. What Doc had. By the way, there's one scene when Viggo Mortensen's calling out Doc that had a Marty McFly flashback.
Yeah.
I think it was raining at the time too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, again, preempt maybe your zero on this, both of you, but I liked it. I thought it was handled well. It's heavily attached to the themes of this, and again, I like the themes, so I'm giving it a 1.
No, I was going to give it a 1 because is it effective? Like it's always going to be until the problem of prejudice and or racism goes away in humanity.
Hold on, we're talking about antagonists, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that antagonist was one of the stronger parts of this. Honestly, I thought that was the one thing that I felt was the antagonism throughout this entire movie.
I agree as well.
And they did a good job portraying the fact that, Dr. Shirley, despite how much people wanted him there,
was still an outsider and was still treated
as a human being. He was unwelcome.
They wanted him
as a celebrity. They wanted him there, but as a human, he was unwelcome. And I thought that was really well done.
Was that Mahershala Ali playing the piano, or was it fake?
I don't know,
pretty
because
sure it was faked, but it certainly looked really real.
So I was trying to figure that out because
I
they
thought
had
the same thing
him.
to myself too. Yeah.
They had him there. You see his face. You see his hands connected to his body, and like he's playing the.
But just think
piano.
this way: they could have just overdubbed it with like actual.
Maybe he's a brilliant piano player, but I would assume that's some kind of CGI. But like it was pretty cool.
Or they're just like, do this a lot. The piano.
We'll talk about music later on. I don't know how I feel about the music in this, but
all right.
Antagonist I think was pretty strong, and I'm gonna give that a 1 for sure.
Yeah, I think it was well done and well portrayed, and realistically at least.
I apologize for being prejudiced to what I thought your scores would be.
Right.
So I got
all good. Well, why don't you go on? Since we've addressed that, why don't you talk about protagonisty?
Right, this might surprise you. I actually don't think Doc Shirley is a protagonist in this, because I think you see everything through Tony's eyes. It starts with him. It ends with him.
You're right. It is his story, we'll say, in quotes.
So, yeah, exactly. And even though I think Mahershala Ali is the strong secondary character of this, but I'm going to say that Viggo Mortensen playing Joe Pesci...
playing Tony Lip.
No, I mean, because he's not always. He's sometimes Michael J. Fox.
Oh, sure.
A little bit of
Doc.
Ray Liotta.
The Liotta I saw too.
So, but overall, I actually think he did a very good job, even if he was a little bit of a overacting for this.
So 65, something like that. Yes, certainly it's through Tony's eyes, like throughout, like from start to finish. But I still think we get a lot of, at least, further insight, I'll say, into Doc's personality and character and who he is and like what his life has been like and how he's trying to go forward and use his talents to try to help like the community, his community, and like just bring people together the best that he can.
But every moment of insight you get about Doc is through Vigo's eyes. When you find out he's gay, it's Vigo finding out he's gay.
Right.
When
You're totally
see
right.
him being sad for the first time, it's Vigo seeing him being sad for the first time. So that's what I'm just saying. I don't think it's
a bad angle. Hold on, I'm almost done. So I still think though, like because they share so much screen time, I'm going to put them together in protagonists. Although Tony being like, if you will, above him in terms of the narrative and the main character, but I'm going to give them both a strong 1 if I do indeed do that. But I do see the argument to make Mahershala / Doc like the most important side character. I'm just personally cutting up the other way, but I'm definitely giving him, and because of that, I'm giving them both a lot of credit. Got Steve-O.
I'm going to give them both protagonist credit as well, and here's why. You're right. You do see this entire story through Tony's eyes. However, he is being basically dragged through Doc Shirley's story. You know, it's a story that had nothing to do with Tony. Unless he, like, anyone who was hired in that position would have been that guy, right? Like, but he was hired for his specific set of skills. It's about, this movie is about Doc Shirley.
Oh, certainly.
So I'm gonna give
He's like
them
the
both
Ishmael
protagonists
of the
credit.
story.
If this was a novelization of this film, I'm sure there's a book out there somewhere. Is it first person or third person?
I say probably first, yeah.
Yeah, probably first person.
And I would have given then the first person character of. That's my.
I'm trying.
I get you.
Now you got me trying to think of a novel that is first person where I give someone who is not the character who's the first person a protagonist credit.
Yeah, no, I get you. Well, don't think too long on that.
But it is like it is, you know, like it's Doc's story, it's Tony's view of it. And I think I have to give them both protagonist credit for that reason. Maybe at some point I'll reevaluate, but for right now I can't. I don't want to drag this out and like talk about it forever because I've already done that, right, Ian?
What?
But I'm gonna give them both full credit for this. I think they both do a good job acting in this movie,
Yeah, I think
and I think that their characters are pretty well realized, if not as fleshed out as I would have loved them to be in my fucking perfect world. But I think that they both do a really good job, and I love watching them work off of each other. If nothing else, this is a really good like buddy road trip movie, and these two work off of each other really well in it. And
I agree with that.
I got to give them full credit for that.
Yeah, I mean, they did a phenomenal job, again, with what they were given. So I think that's why I'm giving them both protagonist credit and both a 1.
Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yes. All right, well, you will guess to talk some more Steve-O because you're on to secondary.
All right. Secondary characters. So there is Dolores, Tony's wife, who is very important to the movie, even though she's not in it all that much.
But her presence is felt, at least to him, as a character.
She is basically Tony's like North Star. That's another thing. I wish she had been more of that guiding factor. Like, you could feel it there, but it wasn't like she did anything to make that so. You know what I mean? Like, she...
Yeah, I see.
There wasn't any like big scene with the two of them where it was like, oh, this is why he really fucking loves her.
May I counter that for quickly? I'm not saying that there's a big scene for that, but through the letters they send to each other, or at least he sends to her, you could tell he cared, and Viggo made a point in his performance to show his, but you could tell she played it very well in portraying doting.
Yeah,
wife.
no doubt.
So even though they didn't have any scenes together, to me it was woven through the movie very well in a very Roland Barthes fashion.
Yes,
fair enough.
Very nice.
Yeah. So I mean, you had her. You had
Well, he had his bandmates. That's what I was going to point out.
Yeah, you had his bandmates, who's
the trio.
Names I
Oleg and something very
recall.
generic, like Brian or David or some shit.
Who were fine. Actually, Oleg was the standout of those two.
Yeah.
Obviously, he had some pretty interesting insight a couple of times throughout the movie. I do kind of wish I knew more about them, but as far as what was portrayed by them on screen, I thought they were perfectly fine.
Yeah, I think they served their
especially
roles
Oleg
fine.
was pretty good. You know, you had a couple other characters throughout. Doc Shirley's, oh God, I don't even know, manservant. I don't know what to call him.
No, his actual like butler.
Yeah,
His personal assistant.
No, I think he would prefer manservant.
All right. Well,
he was
Let's not
interesting.
speculate.
He was very one dimensional. I thought, like, you know, you kind of got to know, like, he was charismatic. I think, like, I liked him, but
I've seen the actor before, and he's
he's been around. I forget what his name is off the top of my head, but he's been around, and he does a good job in this film. But I think that's another like role that in a I don't want to say better script, but like in a different script, he could have had a couple more lines that would have really fleshed him out a lot more. And I would have liked to see something like that. You know, and you have Tony's whole family who are just like generic Italians pretty much. But you know, and there's a couple other characters who I will leave to you guys. I don't want to steal everybody, but I'm probably leaning towards a 1 for supporting characters.
yeah, I think it's probably collectively. I certainly personally liked Oleg the most, but I think like it sort of ties into antagonists because many of the side characters were like, again, the racist, like hillbilly bargoers and the owner of the club and you know, all that. But then you know you got the bartender at the other like the alternate bar there / restaurant,
Orange,
the
whatever.
Orange Shack or Club or whatever.
Orange something.
So I'm just saying, like it's all like, you know, the world is filled out by these characters they encounter from town to town, which were all fine, but of course that means they're not on screen for very long because they're on there for like, you know, one concert or whatever, 1 or 2 interactions, and then they're gone. Like the guy who had his but you know, his servants served them fried chicken, and of course like that was like sort of a running like gag throughout. But like I think collectively they all deserve a 1 because it filled out the world, and you know, whether honorable people or dishonorable, if you will, they're all made sense and fit in there. But Oleg for me was a standout because he did have a nice speech, at least that one time, and possibly before that sort of had some allowed Tony to get some more insight to Doc and why he's doing what he's doing and to his personality. So
I love the use of the, I guess, black underclass in this to portray how Mahershala Ali, who is also a supporting character of mine, is mistaken in his preconception of the world. He says, he feels between these two groups of society. When he's at the hotel, hey, come play horseshoes with us.
Mm-hmm.
No, he can't because it's like, in his mind, it's he himself is being elitist there. Yeah. Even though at the end, when he's at that bar and playing, he finally finds like
sort of a balance,
kind of that pure music that he can enjoy. I don't know. It's interesting that I feel that yes, sometimes it's heavy-handed, but I think it informs Doc Shirley's character quite a bit.
No, you're right. I do agree with that. That's a good point.
So maybe a 1.
Yep, me too. See about 1.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 1.
All right, and that shall bring me to dialogue. So I think it was pretty solid enough. Like I said, of course, the centerpiece is like the growing interactions as they get to know each other between Mahershala and Viggo and their characters. But like I said, I think Oleg makes a good point to Viggo as Tony, like maybe in the latter third of the film. So I think it was all well enough done. Like it wasn't anything mind-blowing, but it was certainly believable. And I believed, you know, the whole time seeing their relationship unfold and grow and change. And I did like the aspect of Doc helping him with his letters, and then Dolores knew about that at the end. Like that was a nice touch. It was all fine. And yeah, there were some like moments of comedy, of course, like sprinkled throughout in a feel-good movie like this. That's sort of expected. So I think it all works perfectly well. I'll probably just give it a solid 1. I can't think of anything specific, but no, like I didn't cringe at all. I didn't feel like, oh, that was stilted, that was awkward, like that was odd.
So I was in a pretty full theater when I went, and they were laughing the entire time.
Really?
I mean, not the entire time.
My theater got
I was chuckling.
My theater got some chuckles, but
no, there was like belly laughs happening, especially when you would the dialogue pair between the very eloquent Doc Shirley and Tony Lip, who won't admit he doesn't know the words that Doc Shirley's using.
Yeah,
and they have a lot of good exchanges like that. So
that's true.
Again, even if I didn't think it was the funniest thing in the world, I think everyone else did in my theater, and I
still
was
worked.
entertained the entire time.
Sure.
Yeah, I thought that the dialogue was fairly strong in this. It was I think if nothing else, that a lot of the reason that this is being considered for Oscar nomination is the
chemistry
between the two main characters of this, and a lot of that has to do with the dialogue and the natural feeling dialogue between the two of them, and a lot of that has to do with their acting for sure. But there is something to be said for the script and how it was written up, and for that I have to give dialogue a 1 for sure.
All right, cool. So let's move on to style, and that'll be you, E.
As I mentioned earlier, this is an odd couple movie, and
Perfect Strangers.
They handle what needed to be done to make that genre work, and I thought they did very well. I mean, is it doing anything outside of the genre to like further it? No, I wouldn't say so, but I would say it's a very well done odd couple movie, and so stylistically, I think there's some beautiful shots of the Midwest and the South. It felt very period piece, so that worked for me. I like the Kentucky fried chicken thing when they get to Kentucky. I don't know. Like, again, the comedic routines worked well. The dramatic scenes worked well for me. So overall, I think I'm going to give it a 1.
No, I pretty much agree. I think it was like perfect. Like I said, perfectly well crafted for what it is, and knew what it wanted to be, and didn't try to diverge. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I was going to mention the very thing you did, like some of the open shots when they're driving on the road, like those are really cool, like very nice, very, very beautifully framed. And yeah, like even like you'll probably talk about the music, Steve-O, so I'll leave like a bit of that for you. But I was digging the soundtrack, like even like the stuff that played over, the driving shots and the actual music he was playing on each concert was enjoyable, I thought. So yeah, man, like again, it's nothing like mind blowing or like changing film, but for what it is, I think it's very well done and it looked very nice.
So this one, I'm a little bit on the fence on.
Yeah.
And let me lay it out for you guys.
Break it down,
and then let me know what you think. I liked a lot of the cinematography. I thought it was pretty good. Not mind blowing by any means, but
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
It was pretty solid. The music bugged me a little bit because not by any means it was bad, but in a movie about a pianist who is stuck between all these worlds, and like we talk about popular music of the time, we talk about classical music of the time, or not of the time, we talk about classical music, we talk about
I get what you mean.
The music that he's playing at these concert halls, which is like kind of a go between the two of them. I thought that the soundtrack was a little bit sparse for me.
That's strange to me.
I liked the music, but there wasn't enough of it, and it wasn't.
Are you sure you're remembering the movie correctly? There was a.
I am 100.
I've been debating that the entire time.
I am 100% remembering the movie correctly. So like they talk about popular music at the time when he talks about
Little Richard, Aretha.
When he talks about they name 3 people, and then it's like, all right, moving on. But like, when he talks about Little Richard, he's like, it's very complex. Like, I was like, oh, let's fucking talk about that. Like, that would be cool. Like, have a little scene about that, but they don't go into that really at all. There is an overture. There is like the score, but it's kind of sparse. Like, the music that he plays is awesome, but that's like the musical touchstone of this movie, and I wanted more from the I don't know what the word is for it, like the outer music, I guess, like the music that you're not supposed to focus on. I wanted to be drawn in by the score. I wanted to be drawn in by like even the conversation about like popular music. I wanted his music to start to touch on that type of music, which it did a little bit. I was gonna say,
it did do that at the end, but
a little bit, but not a lot. And like it was kind of like a hand wave to the fact that they mentioned that earlier, and like that kind of bugged me. Again, it's not to say that I don't like the music in this film. I just thought that it should have been more of the focus of the movie than it was. So there's that. In terms of the I guess how style plays with, or how themes play with style, I thought this movie did a pretty good job. And there are these different feels for all of the sets that they do, which I really liked. Whether it's the nice hotel that they're in or the shitty hotel that they stay in at the end together because, they can't go any further. And they stay at the Blacks Only Hotel.
One of the Green Book hotels.
One of the Green Book hotels. Or, the really nice restaurants the really nice restaurant at the end that he's supposed to play in. That feel changes very much to the restaurant that he ends up playing in, which I thought was a really cool scene.
Yeah.
So, there's this really strange interplay of parts that I really loved and parts that I thought were weaker than they should have been in a movie of this type. So I don't know. I'm laying that out there. Let me know what you guys think.
I actually absolutely agree with you about the not necessarily the soundtrack, but the use of music in this, because they talk a lot about music, and
given
I
its
could
nature.
imagine scenes that could have been inserted but in a weird part, I feel that the music is the least important thematic element of this. It's in a sense a plot device for him to be in this situation.
That's kind of well said. Yeah.
Versus, I think it could be interesting if they're going for a more artsy film. They would have gone with the musical element side, and it's kind of a shame they don't. But yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Oh man, I guess I didn't find it bugging me at all. I actually found myself toe tapping a large portion throughout, so I didn't have that sense of, seems like you were bothered by it, Steve-O. But I do see what you mean, maybe they could have explored it more, but I think you're right, it's sort of oddly bizarre that in a film about a musician, it's not a big part of it. But I think it all worked perfectly well, both on that side and, like I said, the cinematography side, so I'm giving it a 1. Pretty solid 1 on terms of style.
All right. I think that I'm going to give. Man, I think I'm going to give Style a 0. I wanted to give it. I want to give
You're
it a 1.
You're free to give it whatever you want.
Give it a 1. You want to give it a 0.
I kind of want to give it a 1, but
it's too late now.
I've already made up my mind.
All right.
So I'm going to give it a 0.
All right, mark it 0, dude. All right. Well, that brings us to recommendation, and that'll be you again, Steve-O.
As far as recommendation, I think that this movie is a feel-good movie, which is what it set out to be. And, I enjoyed watching it. It was fun to watch. I had a lot of questions, not questions, but reservations at the end of it. But that being said, I think that it's worth a watch. It's good. It's an enjoyable 2 hours, and if you're looking for a movie like a buddy movie or a road trip movie, or you want to see a movie that makes you feel not like shit about how race relations are in this country right now, then this.
I don't mean to laugh, but
I mean, it's this is a movie that does that, I think. So I'll give it a 1.
I absolutely agree with Steve-O that Hershey should have been shot by one of the cops he met, because that's how reality is. And,
Jesus Christ, man.
Oh no, I mean, we can't have feel-good movies that still have something to say about race. And I think that I thought it handled it very well, but I'm naive and stupid. So I'm going to give it a full recommendation. I enjoyed the hell out of it. I wish more movies could be like this in a way. You brought up Detroit. That was hitting you over the head with a hammer, not in a sense thematically, but literally with a hammer. This one was can make me think, but can also leave me not depressed in this day and age.
Fair enough. I mean, I'm definitely recommending as well. whether or not it's an Oscar film, I don't know if it should be, but it definitely was a damn enjoyable film. As we said, maybe depending who you are, it might leaves a little bit to be desired, but I think it was perfectly fine and great performances from the actors, as we said. And yeah, you're right. Perhaps we need a feel-good movie here and again.
No, not at all. We should be miserable at all points.
I'm already miserable at all points, but this film might make you slightly less miserable, perhaps. But I am definitely recommending it as well. So I will give out the final scores unless anybody has any final things to add or gripe about or whatever you'd like to do.
I don't want to get made fun of again.
Well, good luck with that. But here are the scores. Ian, you've given it a perfect 10, it seems. Yep. I've given it a 9, and Sivo, you gave it a 7. So if I've done the math correctly, that leaves us at an 8.6, I think.
Sure.
Yep.
All right. Back me up there. All right, 8.6, which I think is perfectly fucking solid overall.
That's about what it is on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, is it? So, yeah. So there you go. So, yeah.
Not that they're the end all and be all.
Yeah, you're right, but do check it out because we are the be all and end all.
But we're the end all be all, and they are correct because they agree with us.
And our score is close to their score. So there you go. However you judge it. But yeah, I think that'll do it for a Green Book. Green Book. I keep sometimes mispronouncing it. But anybody final thoughts overall? If not, I think we'll be driving into the deep south ourselves, but not anytime soon. I've been Scott Thurlow. I've been here with Jonathan Ian Manzer.
Stay happy.
And Stephen Amosi.
Have a good night.
And we shall see you in the next concert. Good night.
Editing and engineering by Scott Thurlow. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Or mods?